NIL isn't going anywhere, but I'm here to tell you that outside collectives are going the way of the dinosaur, and that includes Spyre Sports Group. According to a report by Football Scoop, which confirms what I have been told all along, Tennessee Athletic Director Danny White wants to pull that all in-house. I like to think of myself as a businessman. This is a no-brainer. I don't care if it's 10% that Spyre Sports gets of these deals, if it's 1%, or if it's 90%. Caleb, why wouldn't Tennessee want that? How are you, sir?
I am good. How are you doing?
Well, so your thoughts on Spyre Sports Group and outside collectives going away, because that is going to happen. Alabama just shut down their biggest collective, and it was led by John Parker Wilson, former Alabama quarterback. There's already now, according to John Bryce, who I always thought was my main competition, to be real honest with you, when we covered the beat together. I respect his reporting. He has said on Football Scoop that Notre Dame and Tennessee are already in talks to bring NIL in-house. Caleb, we will look back on this period as the wild, wild west with the Southwest Conference. We will look back on this 3, 4, 5-year period, and this is going to happen sooner rather than later. Hit the like and subscribe button, and I'm going to tell you how Tennessee's going to manage it, and I'm going to tell you how Tennessee's going to be just fine and perhaps better off with outside collectives. Now, I do want to say this. To some extent, we are a collective because we work with Cooper Mays and formerly worked with Jacob Warren. Cooper Mays is, of course, moving on, and we may still, but it will be going through the university instead of going through a third party. So, Caleb, this is all just coming out. I just want to get your initial reaction, and then I want to share some things that I have been told about Spyre Sports Group that has been troubling, but I didn't want to seem like I was just taking shots at other people. So, Caleb, let me ask you, as people hit the like button, please do so. Turn your notifications on as we're with you each and every weekday at 10 a.m. Spyre Sports Group going away. What are your thoughts, Caleb Calhoun?
I'm trying to think of something that was such a splash that lasted for such a short time, the way collectives and something like Spyre Sports did. Because when Tennessee announced this partnership, it was just a year ago, maybe 2, with On3, where the whole concept was like, oh my gosh, Tennessee is so ahead of the curve. Spyre Sports is the future for college football. And then 2 years later, they're probably not going to last that long.
But I think Spyre Sports in Tennessee was ahead of the curve. I just think there was a different set of rules back then.
No,
so I think they were ahead of the curve, and I think they helped get Nico, which they wouldn't have had without. So continue with your thought, and then I'm going to tell you how Tennessee's going to manage this, because they're going to be fine.
NIL collectives, this is my great analogy because I'm a history major, are the Articles of Confederation. So for those who don't know history, and I'm sure most people do, after America was founded as a country in 1776 and they defeat the British in 1783, they draft the Articles of Confederation. This will be their governing document as a new collection of independent nations and unions, the 13 colonies. And that lasted for about 6 years. And then 1780, actually less than that, 1787 comes around and they're like, you know what? We got to reconvene. We need to draft a better document because this just ain't efficient and it's not working. And that's how we get the Constitution. And then the first president comes by way of after the ratification of the Constitution. George Washington becomes the first president in 1789. So basically, NIL collectives are the Articles of Confederation. That's what they are. And where we're seeing college football go now is the actual drafting of is the version of the Constitutional Convention in 1787 in America, in Philadelphia.
Well, let me tell you what's going to happen. What everybody is waiting on is the federal legislation that that mandates revenue sharing, which we think is going to be about 22 million. So let me tell you why this is good for Tennessee. Because Tennessee has salespeople. Goodness gracious, sales is not easy. It's even more difficult asking somebody to pay an extra $5,000 for a parking pass. So they've got those guys. Why can't they sell it on their own? Besides, Tennessee's not real hard to sell right now, by the way. So why not bring it in-house? That's what all those associate athletic directors are for. That's basically what they do in a large regard. Now, here has been my issue with all collectives, Spyre particularly. I have had some people tell me that the athletes get 90% of the revenue generated by Spyre Sports Group. People I trust. I've had other people tell me that it's flip-flop, that it's more like that Spyre Sports Group gets 90%, and then the other 10% goes to the athletes. I don't know where that number is. I'm not going to pretend to know. But there should be transparency, and there has to be with the University of Tennessee because it's federally funded. So at the end of the fiscal year, you will know how much player X was paid. Now, if he gets his own deal on the outside, Tennessee may try to make it exclusive. Spyre Sports Group tried to make their contracts exclusive, and guys like Jacob Warren and Cooper Mays were too smart and said, no, I'm not going to sign that contract. You can redo it. So if they want to go out and get their own stuff, I imagine they'll be able to do it. But Caleb, I believe this helps Tennessee because I have mentioned before that Eli Drinkwitz at Missouri has an advantage over Josh Heupel because of the law in Missouri that states you can be a part of NIL discussions. Well, now you can not only be a part of NIL discussions, if Josh Heupel wants to, he can sign Tennessee's check over to whoever the next player might be. Tennessee, absolutely, you can call it good fortune, you can call it good luck, you can call it blessed by the Lord if you're a religious person like me. But whatever the case may be, there was a window to go throw $2 million a year at a player that could change your program. And Nico has done that. I think more people have jumped on board because of recruiting. And I'm sure recent recruits have gotten money to come to Tennessee. The way this is going to transition is, yes, you're going to get money to come to Tennessee, and then you're going to get more money to stay at Tennessee. So whatever the percentage is, Caleb, now Tennessee has that percentage more to spend on those college prospects. I'll give you another factor in this that is very important to watch, and it's going to change the face of college football. But Caleb, Tennessee is clearly one of the teams that has the $22 million to pay. So instead of giving Spyre $2 million, $4 million, whatever it might be, if you're blessed by the Lord, yes, Phil, you should hit like and subscribe. But whatever the case may be, you have that money then to give to prospects, then to give to your own guys for Cooper Mays to stay. So whatever that number is, it makes no sense to outsource it.
I agree. I think a lot of this was to streamline it for a little while because of the fact that the schools were theoretically not supposed to be involved and it hasn't been addressed federally. Now, you bring up the 90-10, 10-90. I'm one who likes to grandstand and go at collectives and big money donors. And I love, you know me, Dave, how often do I just side with the athletes and their rights? I'm very big on athlete rights, but I can't imagine that it was 90-10 because that I do Spyre.
No, I agree. I think that person was exaggerating, but I think it was somewhere in between. And I think the transparency is what I'm looking for, not necessarily a number.
Yeah, I think it was a lot closer to the 10-90 though. I think Spyre getting 10% and the athletes getting 90. Because again, if you're Spyre and you have a bunch of athletes through this collective and you get 10%, that's still a pretty good check. I mean, agents get what, like 2%? players' salaries usually, right?
Yeah,
Something like that.
maybe 2 or 3. Some end up getting 5 on really good deals. Now, there was a comment
Yes,
that I want to address. Bender of Strings says, all a salary cap will do is cause programs to circumvent it, and we're back to what it was before the NIL.
I agree.
Right. So they're going to find ways to cheat outside their budget. That very well could happen. But here's why it might not. This completely changes things in terms of having a mega conference. This absolutely presses the accelerator to the floor because there are a lot of schools, once this passes and it's in the House, and I've talked to a lawyer this morning via Twitter about this. Once this passes, everybody's going to bring their collectives in-house. Not every school can pay $22 million for their roster. And that's when you're going to see the big difference between a Tennessee, and I'm not picking on anybody, but a Mississippi State that has half the budget. They're an SEC team. I'm not saying the SEC is going to break up, but there's going to be a mega conference, and this just makes it happen sooner. Guaranteed.
Okay, so I actually kind of agree with you on that. The other thing I would bring up is this. If it passes the House and if it goes through Congress, guys, you're going to really take away the incentive for programs circumventing things, because at that point, you don't. At that point, you have a bunch of Logan Youngs. I don't think Logan Young would have done what he did if he knew he was actually breaking the law. Quite honestly, I don't think he intended to break the law. I think he intended to secretly give Albert Means some money under the table. And then you're right, the whole rule was what, crossing state lines to negotiate with Alabama. It was a really loose law to get Logan Young arrested for that. I don't think he was trying.
For those that don't know, this is going way back. A Tennessee prospect, Albert Means, was paid, was it $180,000, I believe,
something like that, yeah,
to go to Alabama. So that's going way back. And yes, part of that was through Philip Fulmer and the power he had politically to get those things moving. And you're right, it was a very loose law. So not only is it a federal law, but listen to how logical this is, Caleb. The NCAA has had at times 8 investigators on its staff. How many Division I athletic programs are there?
Yeah, there's 137, 138.
No, I'm talking basketball too. I'm talking
basketball. You've got like 300.
Yeah. There's no way 7 people can police that. 8 people can police that. However, here's what can and I believe will happen. You'll have a mega conference. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I think it happens by 2030 at the very latest. You will have a mega conference, and then you have leverage. You cheat, you might be to Division II or whatever they call it at the time. Don't cheat, or you could be relegated.
And also, because this will be after this passes the House, you cheat. The mega conference doesn't have to do with the investigation. They got the feds behind them now. You're in big trouble at that point. And so, no, I'm with you. This is how this is all going to go. And for those on principle for athlete rights, I'm not for salary caps, but here's what I would say. They'll do salary caps if players unionize. So there will also be salary floors. So Dave, I think you agree with me. There's going to be a base level of pay that every single college football athlete in that mega conference makes, right?
Yes.
So that's going to be the point of the salary cap is it'll be players will unionize and they will, so it'll hurt somebody like Nico Iamaleava, who I think is worth a ton of money, but it'll help, the backup long snapper on the team who will at least get a base. It's the same with the NBA. Guys, I'm sorry, NBA, NFL, you can complain about Patrick Mahomes' salary. Dave, let's be honest, Patrick Mahomes is vastly underpaid relative to the revenue he generates.
Well, he's done that on purpose. Well, everybody is getting paid now.
Right, but that's my point. Patrick Mahomes is vastly underpaid, but he's underpaid so the NFL can afford to pay these lesser prospects a base salary who are nowhere near as valuable as Patrick Mahomes. They're taking money for Patrick Mahomes. That's fine. That's how a salary cap would work in college football. I think this is but there will be more money to flow around because you're right. Once you get the collectives out, and there are probably some collectives that are very shady and that have taken a lot of money. And I think that's made things even worse. I think schools jumped into this so fast that they don't realize. I think we know this with Florida. this forced so many schools to try to jump in so fast to get a collective going that they kind of fell by the wayside in trying to get efficient with it, and that created its own problems. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes out. I will say this: I don't think Tennessee wants it streamlined too much. Tennessee has too much of an NIL advantage. They don't want to be in a mega conference where, you have some sort of revenue sharing with all the schools in the mega conference. That's not going to be good for them. They want to outbid people for recruits.
Well, they're not outbidding Ohio State right now. They just recently won a recruiting battle with them. I don't think they're winning by outbidding anymore for the most part. I think the money's the money.
They're winning by keeping people from transferring.
Exactly. And yeah. I think they can match anybody. So if Ohio State says, hey, number one offensive tackle in the nation out of Charlotte, we'll give you $750,000. Tennessee just said $500,000. Then that number one offensive tackle from Charlotte calls Tennessee and says, I got an offer for $750,000. And Tennessee says, okay. And then you make a decision just purely based off which school you want to go to, which I think you and I would agree that right now, Tennessee's a great choice. They're on the upswing. The flip side is if this happened and you had Jeremy Pruitt as your head coach or one of the dodo birds that they had before, you could get buried behind 25 other teams. But it's all laying out perfect, in my opinion, for Tennessee. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. That's where I met, though, is that it is to keep players around, but Tennessee is doing that better than anybody because they're ahead of the curve with their use of NIL, but they also have more NIL in general. So they're able to afford to keep their entire team together. What they just did this offseason, guys, was unheard of. To get Cooper Mays to come back, to get Amari Thomas to come back, even Javonte Spraggins, Brew McCoy. They threw out NIL money to get guys back who should have probably gone to the NFL draft, quite honestly. And that's something that they can do with the size of their collective that it'll be harder, even if they're committed to that way of using the NIL. It'll be harder if you do a revenue sharing model. They don't want that.
Okay. I think Tennessee, with what they have in Neyland Stadium, we talk about facilities, they're all equal. But with what they've done with Neyland Stadium, with the way they take care of their people, and you're going to smirk when I say culture, but I think all of that combined makes them a better choice if the money's even than a vast majority of schools. If you take out location, if you take out maybe a legacy tie, if you take out a lot of those things, I put Tennessee up against just about anybody.
Well, I'm with you on that. Tennessee to me is top 15, well, I don't take out location though. That's a big deal. You say everything being equal, I think you probably have a point with the culture. I think even if you threw out culture, okay, this is where we go back to like the old recruiting rules. Let's take the old recruiting rules for a minute, okay?
And let's be real clear. Are we talking about just football or everything? Because
football.
Okay. But let's just say this, football and basketball for the sake of argument.
Well, see, the thing with basketball, and I'm going to be honest, I've covered basketball recruiting enough. Players commit to coaches. Full stop, period, end of story.
Well, Nike's probably still doling out some cash too. All right, let's stick with football.
Yeah.
Let's stick with football. And there was a comment about David Sanders. I don't want to get into an argument about it. Todd posted this. Ohio State offered David Sanders more than UT. Maybe, but I guarantee it was comparable, Caleb. I mean, he didn't choose to go to Tennessee over Ohio State, and Ohio State was offering $10 million and UT was offering $100. So they were comparable.
Yeah, Tennessee's winning this recruiting battles not because of what they're offering up front. I said that from the start. They are winning it because of NIL, but it's because of they are laying out a path for these kids to say, hey, we have NIL. We'll offer you this right now, but this is what you can be. You know who it actually reminds me of, Dave? It's funny. I'm going to give him a little bit of credit on this, little bit. But I know Lane Kiffin's story of recruiting at USC in 2002 when basically Lane didn't Pete Carroll say, hey, you're responsible for recruiting every state but California. So the other 49 states is basically what he said.
I didn't know that, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. So Lane had to go to Mike Williams. Remember Mike Williams? Lane had to go recruit Mike Williams out of Florida when USC was 6-6. And what Lane learned very well in recruiting, this is why he actually recruits pretty well, was if you have a detailed blueprint plan of what you can do for the player, not as a freshman, but as a sophomore and as a junior, you have it. Apparently, and you may know this more when recruiting than I do, you have an edge over 90% of the coaches in college football recruiting because they don't do that a lot of times.
I want to end it with this. This is good as a whole for Tennessee. Just give me a yes or no in 30 seconds. The show represented by Banks and Jones. T. Scott Jones joins us later to talk about that Faison Brandon lawsuit. Well, it's because they're Tennessee's trial attorney. You can play to win with Banks and Jones because they'll go to trial. You've heard of other lawyers. They say they'll go to trial and fight for you. They won't. They just want to settle. That's the easiest way out. Well, that's not Banks and Jones, led by T. Scott Jones. They won't settle. They'll go to trial for you. Tennessee's trial attorney. They play to win. Truly, Tennessee's trial attorney when it comes to criminal defense or personal injury. Why settle? It's Banks and Jones. T. Scott Jones. BanksandJones.com. So I'm going to make you go yes or no on me. This is good for Tennessee that collectives are getting out of the collective business because there's no use for them anymore. Yes or no?
Yes, right now, but no long term. No, once the mega conference and
Okay.
federal legislation.
I'll get there. I'll get there. Hold on.
Okay. All right.
It's yes, and here's the reason. Danny White. If they had Dave Hart, then I'd be like, uh-oh, you don't want him running a collective. Okay, so second
Be
question.
fair to Dave Hart. Dave Hart had the most impossible task ever when he took over Tennessee.
He was an axe man. I've seen those guys hired before at radio stations. The job is to come in and cut cost, and that's what he did. So yeah. I'm not trying to be unfair to Dave Hart at all. That's what he was hired to do. When he was done, he was ready.
They hired him to be the bad guy.
Exactly. He just took it a little too far for the Lady Vols. All right, second part. Mega conference is good or bad for Tennessee?
Horrible.
Totally
horrible.
Totally.
Once the mega conference happens, Tennessee's going to split, going to lose its revenue advantage because there's going to be revenue sharing across the board. Tennessee doesn't want that.
Okay. Totally disagree. I think that Tennessee's in that ballpark in which they're going to be able to compete financially. And I think just like Ohio State and just like Texas and just like Southern California, they have a lot to sell more than about 80 other schools. I think there's a delineation between elite programs, top 25, top 40-ish, and the other programs. And that puts Tennessee in that group and not in the other group. And I think with all they have to offer, if the money's equal, they're not going to lose a guy that they really want outside of some tie that you can't overcome.
But how does the mega conference change that? That already exists. That's already true right now. A mega conference, all that does is you just talk about the finances. Because every team in the mega conference is going to have the same finances. They're going to take some from Tennessee to give it to another team in the mega conference that doesn't make the same level of money.
No. I don't like when I'm talking about revenue sharing, I'm talking about sharing with the players. Let's make sure I'm not talking about sharing school to school.
A mega conference is going to require revenue sharing school to school. That's why it's horrible for Tennessee. They are going to put everything in a pot and make it equal.
That's why that explains it. That's why you and I disagree. I don't think that's going to be the case.